This happened to me about 3 months ago. A little background about myself. I sadly suffer from chronic pain from a back injury I've had operated on 3 times. Most of the time I deal with it and live my life, but every few years it starts to really get to me. I go into a bad depression and stop talking to my family and generally turn into a hermit. When this happens, my family gets worried I'm going to hurt myself. I have no idea why, because I've never even made an attempt or even said I was planning to. They'll send me to the mental hospital and usually put me on a 5150. For those of you that don't know what that means, it basically means I stay there for 3 days. None of this has ever really bothered me before. I have good insurance, so the place they send me is basically like a hotel where you can't have shoelaces or touch each other. When they wheel you in is the worst part. You're strapped to a gurney, and like me, if you come in the middle of the day, you're wheeled right through the day room, where all the other patients get to stare at you coming in. This might be a good time to describe myself. I'm male, a little over 6'2" and around 285 pounds, with tattoos covering both arms. Since I've been depressed for months, my beard and hair are out of control, and I look like a generic biker, so I don't generally have anyone ever trying to mess with me. I'm very friendly, but unless you know me, I don't look like it. I've been through all this psych ward stuff a couple times before, so I know the gist of what's going to happen. They take all my info, make sure I have no laces or anything with strings, and show me to my room. This psych ward is co-ed, but roommates can only be of the same sex. It's also low security, meaning everyone here is supposedly non-violent. My only issue with this place is they have people like me who have no mental illness and are just going through a hard time, mixed in with all different levels of people. But in the past 2 visits here, I had never had a problem with anyone, and I was hoping I would just do my 3 days and be done. They send me to my room, and the nurse says I'll be roommates with Tim. She starts to say something along the lines of how Tim is a nice guy, which of course made me a little weary, but we're in a psych ward and everyone here has some issues. These rooms are basically like any crappy motel room, except a bit bigger with 2 beds. They also have a bathroom that annoyingly doesn't have a full door, 1 desk, and each patient gets their own dresser. It's 3 p.m. and Tim is sound asleep, which in here isn't anything that weird, as everyone's on different meds that knock them out, or they just have weird sleeping habits, so I don't think anything of it. Matter of fact, after being in the ER for so long, and getting all checked in here, I was dead tired myself, and I decided to fall asleep. I have no idea how long I slept for, but when I woke up, it was pitch black outside. The only light in the room was that little night light that you couldn't turn off. Tim was sitting wide up on his bed, doing a psst sound. "What's up, man? I'm Brian. I would have said hi earlier, but you were asleep," I said to him, trying to be as friendly as possible, since it's just easier to get along with everyone in places like this. "Yeah, I try to sleep as much as possible, so I don't have to interact with any of the demons." This should have been an immediate giant red flag, and my cue to go ask for a new room. But Tim was much smaller than me, and they search you when you first come in, so I had no reason to fear him. I decided to make conversation with him about said demons, which I found out were really just what he called the nurses and doctors. After talking to him about this for a while, I let him know that I'm still dead tired and need more sleep, so he tells me, "Okay, it's nice to finally have a fellow human as a roommate." I took this as a sign that he was okay with me, and I didn't have to sleep with one eye open. I wake up really early for breakfast, since I haven't eaten in 24 hours. I go to sit down, and Tim comes out and sits with me. Besides referring to the nurses and doctors as demons, he seemed pretty normal. Chatted about normal things for a while, until he suddenly stops talking and is staring at someone behind me. "You see her? That's Jessica. She's an angel." I turn around to see a very gorgeous girl who looks to be in her low 20s, maybe even 18, 19. She waves to say hi to Tim and pretty much everyone else in the dining room area. She seems to be one of those very bubbly girls who go out of their way to be super nice to everyone. When I look back, he's staring at her a little too much, and I snap my fingers. "Hey man, don't freak her out." He gave me a very confused look, like I had said the most absurd thing in the world to him, and got very quiet after that. Honestly, I didn't think much of it, as I had my own stuff to deal with. The rest of the day was just the usual in a place like this. Go to meetings, talk to your doctor, take your meds. But the majority of the time you're just bored out of your mind. The TV gets 4 channels. Even if one of them was HBO, it was always hit or miss. So you spent the majority of the time just reading books in the day room. While I'm reading my book, Jessica comes up to me and sits down to introduce herself and starts asking me all kinds of questions about my tattoos, what I'm reading, and basically just my whole life story. Like me, she was basically just a normal person having a hard time and had no mental illness to speak of. She just had bad anxiety that caused her to have panic attacks since she started college and couldn't deal very well with the pressure. We end up talking for a few hours, and I didn't even think about it till after, but Tim was walking past us over and over. A lot of people did laps in this place just to pass the time, so I really thought nothing of it. I later learned he was basically staring a hole through the back of my head the entire time he walked past me. After talking to Jessica for a while, I tell her I'm going to go take a shower before dinner and we can catch up more later. Like I said before, the bathrooms in this place only have half doors, like an Old West saloon door, but solid. So when I get out, I can see Tim's legs and socks under the door. "What's up, man? Do you need to use the bathroom? I'll be just a minute." He doesn't say anything. He just stands there. "Dude, just back up. You're freaking me out a little." I can hear him breathing really fast and hard now. And these doors don't lock, so he could just push it open if he wanted to. "Dude, you need to back up. I need to come out." And this is when he started screaming at me. Things like, "You are Satan. You are Lucifer." Over and over. I'm really freaking out at this point, and if I open the door and beat the shit out of this guy, it's going to be me who gets shot and put into the quiet room. But I don't know what else to do. Even though he's screaming as loud as he can, no nurses seem to be coming out. The doors to the bedroom in this place are very thick. I'm pretty sure it's because the patients scream in the middle of the night a lot, and they don't want other patients being woken up. Which is a nice policy, but it was really putting me into a bind. After what seemed like 10 minutes, but was probably closer to just 1, I was getting ready to open the door and storm out there, when he suddenly stopped and left the room. I get dressed and instantly go find a nurse and tell them what just happened. I had no idea what they said to him, but they immediately put me into another room. I don't see him at all during this time, or for the rest of the night, but I'm legitimately freaked out. No one has ever screamed at me or cornered me or anything like this before, and I can't sleep at all that night. Since they don't have clocks in there, I have no idea what time it is. I heard him screaming from the nurse's station. "Where is he? Why isn't he coming back to sleep?" The same tone he was using while screaming at me in the bathroom. I crack my door open a bit, and I can hear the nurse talking to him. "You'll see him in the daytime, and can talk to him then. Go back to bed. But I have to see him tonight. It's an emergency." This goes on for another 30 seconds before security finally gets there, and I hear a scuffle. But no way was I going out there to see what was going on. I can hear him yelling, but I can't hear what he's saying, and eventually it starts to fade. He's still yelling, but they are taking him somewhere else. I figured just to the quiet room, which is on the opposite side of the ward from where my room was. Needless to say, even with him supposedly put in the quiet room, I laid awake the entire night. Morning comes, and my doctor is already there, which I found really weird since I usually only saw him once well after dinner time. He calls me into the interview room to talk. As soon as he sees me, he basically asks about all my interactions and history with Tim. I go over everything, and at the end he tells me not to worry. Tim has been transferred to a different hospital. He says the hospital by name. I've lived around here my whole life, so I know the hospital he named is very hardcore. The kind of place where they lock you in a room most of the day. I feel a little bad, because I know he just thought I was stealing his angel, and was just yelling at me. Nothing too bad. But whatever, it's also nice to know I won't have to hit some poor guy in the face for creeping me out. I finish my stay. I actually feel a lot better about everything. Pain is being better managed, and I'm ready to stop being a hermit. My grandma comes to pick me up, and I think we're ready to leave, but the doctor is there again early. My grandma is giving me this look that freaks me out a little. I'm thinking that they're going to try and make me stay longer. Once again, we go into the interview room. This is where they tell me what really happened. That night, Tim came out over and over again, asking the nurse when I was coming to bed. The nurse just kept telling him he'd see me in the morning, without ever telling him I had switched rooms. Apparently, this had gone on for hours before he finally started screaming about it. When he screamed about it, the security came over and he was moved to the quiet room and given a shot to knock him out. The nurse thankfully called Tim's doctor and told him the situation, and his doctor said they better move Tim to the medium security wing, which was just upstairs for a few days until I left. When they went to gather Tim's clothing and other supplies, they found a 7-inch piece of metal broke off from the table in the TV room. The TV room has a camera, but it also has windows where you can see the nurses' station, which didn't always have nurses sitting at it. My guess is that he waited until they left and worked on it until it broke off. I'm 99.99% certain that me asking to change rooms is what saved me from being stabbed to death. The doctors agreed, which is why he got sent to the more hardcore hospital. Since he never actually attacked me or anything, he was never charged with a crime. I have no idea how long he was held in the other hospital, but I'll be a happy man if I never run into him again. To give a little background, I'm a film student in college right now, and me and my buddies are always trying to find new locations to film our movies at. I make horror films, so all the places I'm looking for and exploring are abandoned. And tonight, me and my group of friends, there were 10 of us total, decided to check out this abandoned hospital down the street from our school. They had been there the night before and said it was a great spot for filming, and that I should check it out. So when we get there, I have my Nikon DSLR out with a handheld LED light attached to the top of the camera to scout the place. I didn't film any of this encounter, because I usually only film the inside of these places, but I had my camera and light out to shine the way through. I was leading the way down this narrow path that led to these walls that we had to climb to get onto the roof of the place, where we could access one of the rooms to get inside the building. Because I was carrying my camera in my bag, I was looking for another way up. So I walk a little further down this narrow path, and I start noticing a lot of clothes and random shoes and cardboard lying around the area. There was even an empty sleeping bag. That's when I knew we probably weren't alone, and were likely going to run into someone if we made the wrong move. And boy, did we ever. One of my friends walking behind me down this path notices a door to my right. It's closed, and my guess is that it was locked and not worth trying. But he already had his hand on the door handle and started tugging. I look over, and it barely cracks open, but something is holding it from the inside. I shine my LED on the inside, and I see a shirt tied to the inside of the door to another part of the room, acting as a lock. But my friend, being the way he is, tugs again and rips that shirt right off and swings the door open. In that room, there's someone sleeping on a couch, alongside a group with terrifying-looking people sitting by a light. They all stop and stare at us. In the short glimpse that I got, my friend yells, "Oh shit, get out of here," and slams the door and just bolts past me. I was standing there, a little shaken, almost feeling like I should apologize, but I just follow him instead. My other 8 friends are already on top of the roof at this point, asking what's going on, and we just run for our lives out of the area. I hear the door in the path swing open, but I couldn't look back. From there, me and my friend rendezvous back to a higher point in the area. There was a small gap that you could jump across to get from one roof to the other. 4 of my friends had already jumped across it, ready to just get out of there. But the others stayed on the roof and watched us, stuck like statues. I look at them, confused at what they're staring at. But then I begin to hear this metal dragging on the concrete. I turn around, and there's a crazy-looking man. He seemed to be in maybe his mid-20s, and he was dragging a baseball bat covered in nails along the end of it. He was acting just like Negan from The Walking Dead. My heart sank. At this point, I turn off my light, and all that's shining is the moonlight. I keep my hand on my pocket knife, desperately trying to think of anything to do in case he starts swinging, but I knew there was no way I would come out alive if I tried anything. Plus, I had to take care of my camera. So he walks closer to us, and the first thing he says is, "You're gonna want to keep that light off." And everyone is silent. I'm practically shaking. He then starts circling around us and says, "You guys are never gonna come back here, right? He walks past me and sees the camera, then raises his bat, saying, "And you're gonna put the camera away." I'm barely able to muster, "Yeah, it's off." He looks over to my friends watching from the roof, past the gap. He then points to them and says, "Jump." And they stand silent. The guy says, "Jump across right now. Just run and jump. You'll make it." Keep in mind, the gap doesn't look that bad, but the drop is fatal if you don't make the jump. And my 4 friends are all staring down at the drop, fearing what could happen. One of them says he doesn't think he can make it, and the guy replies, "Run and jump, or else you're gonna regret it." So my friend steps back, runs, and barely makes the jump. From there, one by one, the other 3 make the jump across, all while the guy is standing right behind us with his bat, dragging it along the concrete. Once we all got across, he says to us, "You're never coming back here again, you understand?" We all awkwardly apologize and run away back to our cars in the distance. I get in my car and look back at the area, and he's still standing there, watching us with his bat as we speed off. Realistically, we probably could have ganged up on him as a group if anything bad had happened, but who knows if anyone from that group would have came out. Sadly, the hospital is a no-go from here on out, but I'll still be looking for some more sick locations. What scared me the most about this was how fearless and disturbed this guy looked. He'd definitely seen some stuff, and had undoubtedly used that bat before on someone else. He looked like a killer. He was a killer, and it was his calmness that really got to me. Back in August, I was hospitalized in the voluntary psychiatric ward at the nearby hospital due to some major anxiety and depression issues. It was unfortunately my second hospitalization in as many months, and this time they only had room for me in a room with a roommate. No one knows why, but for some reason when the psychiatric unit was built, they decided to put in rooms with roommates. Because of this, usually only high-functioning people are put into double rooms. Usually. So I show up, and the nurses all remember me, but most of the patients are different. Because it's the voluntary unit, there's no actively psychotic or violent people. My roommate, Jane, seems nice enough. She was a quiet, plain, petite woman. One thing she really liked to do was sit and work on crossword puzzles. In the rooms, each patient gets a desk and dresser, and our dressers were right next to each other. Each room also has very beautiful photographs in them that are obviously not behind glass. I was admitted to the hospital around 6 p.m. At 9:30 p.m., I had taken my medication and was meditating before going to sleep. I was looking at this beautiful picture of a tree and fence at sunset and focusing on it while slowing my breathing. Then, I noticed that there was writing on it. I hadn't noticed the writing earlier. It was in pencil and was put into the picture with enough force to indent it. The writing said, "They are liars. Fucking liars." And some other things I couldn't make out. It weirded me out a bit, but I figured it had been there before. I went to the nurses' station and let them know. If you've ever been in a psychiatric unit, you'll know it's terribly boring. I spent most days walking around the unit, or I was painting in the art room or in groups. I began to notice that my roommate never went to any groups. In fact, she never left the room. Then I realized that she never left her desk. Each time I came into the room, she would be sitting at the desk working on a crossword. I figured that was how she dealt with the boredom, and tried to make small talk when I came in and out of the room. Then I began to realize that the crossword wasn't changing anymore. It was the same crossword with no progress. The second night, I went to go to bed around 10:30 p.m. When I had woken up that morning, she was sitting at her desk working on crosswords again. When I came back to go to sleep, she was still working on crosswords with the light on. I shrugged at it because by this point, she was no longer responding to me saying hi, or asking if she was going to group. I figured she might be having a medication reaction, or just not feel like talking. So I turned off all of my lights and pulled the curtain that separated our beds. The medication I was on at the time basically knocked me out, so I was able to fall asleep. Around 2 a.m., I woke up to one of the medical assistants or nurses asking my roommate if she thought it was time to go to bed or turn off her light so her roommate could sleep. She didn't really respond to the person and didn't turn off the light. I ended up going back to sleep. At some point, she had turned off the light and gone to bed. I woke up in darkness again. I had earplugs in, and the medications I was on would literally make me sleep for 12 hours straight without waking, so I was confused. I realized I could hear someone talking. I took my earplug out and realized it was my roommate. She kept repeating, "Jesse, help me. Jesse, help me." I responded with, "Jane, are you okay? Jane, are you okay?" She didn't respond to me, but stopped saying it, so I thought she was talking in her sleep or something, and I went back to bed. I woke up again at some point, and she was saying the same thing, but louder. I knew that she wasn't talking in her sleep this time. I tried to get her to respond to me, and she never responded to me. She was just semi-yelling, "Jesse, help me. I need help, Jesse." I got up and got the night nurse, whose name was Jessie, and told her my roommate was calling for her. By the time I came back into the room and the nurse came, Jane was hysterical. She was crying out for Jessie and trying to get out of bed. Jessie did her best to calm her, and I was rattled, but given the sedation I was on, I ended up going back to sleep. When I woke up the next morning, my roommate wasn't in the room, and a table that had been near her bed was in front of the bathroom curtain. I went to use the bathroom, and there was an entire roll of toilet paper in the toilet. I went and got a nurse, because I didn't want to be the one in charge of flooding the bathroom. When I went out onto the floor, I realized two odd things. First, there was a medical assistant sitting at a desk near the door. Second, Jane was also standing at the door. The door only opens when someone phones in, so I was confused as to why there had to be someone essentially guarding the door. I found out from another patient who had insomnia that my roommate had spent the night running around the ward and throwing furniture around. They finally got security down to talk to her, and she calmed down, but then stood in front of the door and was still standing there. I went about my usual routine of eating breakfast and painting. I asked some of the assistants about my roommate, and they tell me she's been standing there since their shift started. 6 a.m. It's now about 10:30 a.m. I'm a little creeped out, but just keep painting. I just do abstract watercolors, but get pretty into it. But I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. I look up, and it's Jane, outside of the room and staring at me. She sees me look up and looks away, but she doesn't move for a good 20 minutes. I get weirded out and decide to go back to my room for the first time that morning. She follows me into the room. I act like I was just picking something up and leave again, and go to the assistant sitting in front of the front door. I tell her politely that I may sound a little paranoid, but I think my roommate is following me around, so she lets me sit with her in front of the door. Since I'm sitting there with nothing to do, I decide to call my insurance company with a question. As I'm on the phone, Jane comes walking up with 2 plastic bins full of stuff. The bins are full of her stuff, and my stuff. She also has the pillowcase off of my bed that is full of my clothing. I lose it. I start yelling, "Why does she have my stuff? Why does she have my iPad? Who let her do this? That iPad is worth $800. And just start hysterically crying. When she came out, there were 3 nurses standing by me, and they are just flabbergasted. They've never seen anything like this. I'm on the floor crying with my eyes closed, and someone kneels down, puts their arm around me and says to me, "It's going to be okay. You're going to be okay." I assume it's a nurse and open my eyes. It's Jane. I tell her to stop touching me and tell the nurses I want her away from me. The nurses end up bringing me into a private meeting room to go through my stuff and tell me that Jane is going to be transferred to the involuntary ward at some point during the day. Unfortunately, due to Jane's behavior, my stuff cannot be put back into the room, and I'm essentially left without a room for most of the day. While this has been going on, Jane has not moved from the back door, which opens up into a stairwell that you go down to get to the garden outside. There's no way for her to open it, obviously. but she just stands there for hours. Hours. After a while, I just start ignoring her, even though she stares at me whenever I'm in her line of vision. Around 6 or 7 p.m., my husband and I are playing cards with another patient who had just moved onto our unit so that Jane could be moved upstairs. We were playing in the meal room, which is the room that Jane was waiting near. As we're playing rummy, we see the psychiatrist come up with 2 security guards. She's explaining to Jane that Jane has to go upstairs. Jane gets agitated and refuses to move. A security guard goes to take her arm, and she gets more agitated and starts yelling, "No, no, no." When they go to grab her, she turns to the window, starts banging on it, looking straight at me and screams at me for help. They end up dragging her, literally kicking and screaming the entire length of the unit upstairs. I was a bit shaken up, but at least now she was off the unit. I end up with another roommate also named Jane, but she is super sweet and in the unit because she's detoxing from some meds she was on while in another unit in the hospital. My attending psychiatrist assures me that my reaction was completely normal to someone having a psychotic break, and I start to feel more comfortable. I didn't see her again after that, so I think her condition may have deteriorated more. As I note earlier today when I was at lunch with a friend, I thought I saw her in a car and almost freaked out. The poor lady getting out of the car was so confused as to why I was looking at her with such a look of fear on my face. This video contains true horror stories for a rainy night. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and subscribe, and watch this one next.